Ms. Carbo, could you please step down to make use of the exhibit? Now, during the gun safety course, could you please point out in this photo where exactly you were standing?
Yes, so I was standing to the right of Drew Control at the red X.
Why exactly were you standing?
Well, Drew Control put us in these positions and I stayed there the whole entire time.
Thank you, Ms. Carbo, you may step down. Did Drew Cantrell fire the gun at this point?
Well, not exactly. He was about to fire the gun and he flinched right before he shot the first shot.
What do you mean by flinched?
Well, he made a sudden movement. His hand moved quickly and he fired the first shot. And then seconds after, hit my left arm. All I knew is that I just felt my leg go numb and I collapsed on the ground.
Ms. Carbo, what happened to you?
Well, I was on the ground, the leg completely numb, and I was in so much pain. There's just blood all over.
Substantial or beneficial evidence, if I may. When I've written that this witness is using working on evidence, as the plaintiff doesn't have to put through the second damages, this under this condition is the
Your Honor, may I be heard?
Yes.
As for the ruling on the case law, estate of J.V. von Linskog, the plaintiff must establish the existence of an injury during the liability phase of a civil trial. The witness's testimony regarding them falling onto the ground and there being blood everywhere lays foundation for, if I may make an offer of proof, for the witness to discuss that they were in a great amount of pain. As such, the witness's testimony shows emotional damages and therefore does not go into the extent of the injury.
Your Honor, if I may, according to case law, estate of J.V. von Linson, plaintiff still does have to establish that there is an injury, but not to the extent of the injury. And the language that the witness is using, Your Honor, is just used to prejudice the jury.
Your Honor, may be heard?
No, I'm going to overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Would you like me to re-ask the question?
Yes, please.
Ms. Carbo, what happened to you?
Yeah, so like I was saying, just blood everywhere and I was in so much pain. And before I knew it, I was being brought to the hospital. And the doctor told me that I had a bullet lodged in my leg. It was probably the worst I've ever been told. I couldn't believe that this was actually happening.
Thank you, Ms. Carbo. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions. Permission to reassemble the exhibit.
May I proceed, Ross? Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Carbo. I'd like to talk about why you're here today. You intend to take every last penny you can from Shooting Star Gun Club, correct?
Well, I have really expensive medical fees and this money would really help pay them off.
So that's yes to my question.
Well, yeah, I think it's gonna help me.
Even if it's the last thing you do.
Well, yes.
And you've also started advocating for the Imperial gun ban, correct?
Yeah, I really just want to make sure that there's control on guns so people don't end up having an injury like I did.
And that's also why you're here today, to advocate for this gun ban.
Well, I'm here to testify, but yeah.
And now I'd like to talk about how you were at Shooting Star on May 20th. You decided to buy a firearm from Shooting Star Gun Club, correct?
That's true.
And you spoke to Skylar Coleman,
Yes,
the owner of Shooting Star.
that is true.
And you went into the store to speak to her.
Yes, after sending emails, I decided to just go down to the store.
And Skylar Coleman personally spent over an hour with you going over aspects of guns, correct?
Yeah, she was just touching up on basic things about guns.
Then after you took a safety course.
Is that your question? After I took a safety course, does she explain it?
And then after you purchased your firearm, Ms. Carbo, you took a safety course.
That is true.
And the person leading the safety course was Drew Cantrell. And during the safety course, Drew Cantrell was demonstrating how to fire a weapon.
That is true.
And they were also going over basic safety procedures when holding a gun.
Yes, they were just demonstrating some basic rules on the guns.
And up to this point, nothing Miss Cantrell was doing made you uncomfortable.
No, at the time I was just having my safety class lesson.
And during this training course, you thought you saw Drew Cantrell flinch, didn't you?
Yeah, before they fired the first shot, I saw them make a movement.
But you are an novice gun player,
Yeah, I knew the guns.
and you know nothing about gun recoil.
Yeah.
And so during this training course, you heard 2 shots, correct?
That's correct.
Drew Cantrell, before they fired, also told you to pay attention and watch closely to their hand movements.
That's true.
And even though you were watching closely and paying attention, you never saw Drew Cantrell pull the trigger a second time, did you?
Well, I mean, I got shot right after, seconds after. I don't really remember seeing.
But that's a yes to my question.
Yes.
And when you purchased your gun, you also filled out some paperwork.
Yeah, there was some government form that I had to fill out.
And if you could please turn to Exhibit 17 in your exhibit binder. This is the government form you filled out, correct?
That is correct.
And it's a fair and accurate copy?
Yeah.
And you signed it, didn't you?
I did.
Your Honor, at this time, the plaintiff moves to admit, the defendant moves to admit Exhibit 17 in evidence.
Any objection? No objections, Your Honor.
So I admitted.
Now directing your attention to the bottom of this, you see where you checked boxes, correct?
Yes.
There are 15 boxes in total and you checked every single one.
Yes, I did.
And you checked boxes such as you are not a convicted felon.
No.
You're not addicted to any substances. You've never been committed to a mental hospital. And you've never been convicted of domestic abuse crimes, correct? And all of this information was accurate, was it not?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Redirect, Your Honor.
Yes.
Why did you bring forth a lawsuit against Shooting Star Gun?
I just wanted to make sure that this would never happen again, and no one else going into that store would be harmed the way I was.
Ms. Carbo, why exactly do you advocate against gun violence?
Like I said, this changed my life. It was terrible. I would never want anyone to go through that. I want to make sure that guns are used safely.
And directing your attention to May 28th, 2022, during the shooting incident itself. Did Drew Cantrell flinch before they fired the first shot?
Yes, I saw them play.
Thank you, Ms. Carbo. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Anything further from the defense?
Nothing further.
You may sit down. You may return to your courtroom at this time. All right, just give us a moment to explore and then we'll call the next one. I didn't make sense with this.
Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Ross Hernandez to the stand.
Mr. Hernandez?
Can I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Hernandez, tell the jury about yourself. My name is Rosalind Hernandez. I own a local Taekwondo studio, Viper Martial Arts in West Pascal. I have a passion for self-defense since it has allowed me to be confident in myself and help others in my community learn to protect themselves.
You know Drew Cantrell?
Yes, they're a shooting instructor at Shooting Star.
You know Skylar Coleman?
Yes, we're located in the same strip mall and they own the Shooting Star Gun Club. We've gotten pretty close over the years since we both want people to safely defend themselves.
Hernandez, have you yourself ever been Shooting Star Gun Club?
I have. We have this running joke that I try to steal Skylar's customers, but I just like reminding people that self-defense doesn't always involve a gun.
Hernandez, you mentioned you know Drew Cantrell.
Was there ever a time before May 2021, inside of Shooting Star Gun Club, you saw Drew Cantrell shoot a firearm?
Yes, I have.
What did you observe?
Skylar has taken me into the gun range a couple times, and whenever I saw Drew shoot, the shots went way off to the right.
Hernandez, could you please open the exhibit binder in front of you and turn to what has been previously marked as Exhibit 8? Ms. Hernandez, do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, these are the gun range safety rules that I've seen posted at Shooting Star.
Is it a true and accurate copy of those gun range rules?
Yes, it is.
Plaintiff moves Exhibit 8 into evidence, Your Honor. The objection.
Submitted.
Ms. Hernandez, please read aloud the second bullet point on that exhibit.
Only point at it if you want it destroyed. Always keep the gun pointed downrange and never point a gun at anything you are not planning to shoot.
Is there ever a time that you witnessed Drew Cantrell breaking this safety rule?
Unfortunately, yes. It was May 2021. I was at Shooting Star to get lunch.
What happened?
I remember hearing some racket behind me, so I turned around and I saw Drew pointing a gun at another worker.
What, if anything, happened next?
It got so quiet, you could have heard a pin drop. Skylar started yelling, "Cantrell, don't you ever point a gun at another person in my shop!" And then led Drew to the back. Skylar later interviewed me about what I'd seen leading up to the incident.
Directing your attention back to Exhibit 8, please read aloud the fifth bullet point on that exhibit.
If it's loaded, leave it on the line. Check to make sure your firearm is unloaded. The action door is open and the safety is on before bringing it off the shooting line.
Was there ever a time that you became aware of Drew Cantrell breaking this safety rule?
Yes, in November 2020.
What happened?
I heard Skylar I thought I was alone in the shop that day, but I ended up hearing Skylar reprimanding Drew.
Fernanda, what did you hear?
I heard Skylar mention times in the reprimanding for leaving bullets in the gun after leaving the shooting range. It makes sense. If you're not going to shoot, then you shouldn't have the gun loaded.
Mr. Hernandez, could you please turn to what has been previously marked as Exhibit 20? Do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, this is a memorandum that was shown to me. It's from Shooting Star LLC to Drew Cantrell. Oh, and it's been signed off by Skylar Coleman.
Is it a true and accurate copy of that memorandum?
Yes, it is.
Plaintiff moves Exhibit 20 into evidence. Any objection?
So admitted.
Mr. Hernandez, please read aloud the first bullet point on that exhibit.
May 2021. I received a report that, in violation of company policy and best practices, aimed a firearm at another person in the gun shop following a verbal argument.
Does this match what you witnessed in May of 2021?
Yes. Well, except for one thing. I don't know what report Skylar is referring to because they witnessed the incident.
Could you please read aloud the second bullet point on that exhibit?
November 2021. I received a report that, in violation of company policy and best practices, you returned a firearm after completing a safety course, but failed to empty the chamber of all ammunition.
Does this match what you became aware of in November of 2021?
Yes, it does.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions on this.
Thank you, Counselor.
Prosecutor. Good afternoon, Mr. Hernandez.
Good afternoon.
You're aware of Shooting Star Gun Club's employee, Drew Cantrell?
Yes, I am.
You believe that Drew Cantrell is a bad shot.
I do.
You also believe that he's arrogant.
I do.
You also believe that he is smug.
Yes,
You testified to 2 incidents,
I did.
one of them being in May of 2021.
That's right.
This incident involved Drew Cantrell pointing another gun at an employee.
That's correct.
However, you were really paying attention to your environment
Well, I heard some racket behind me, so I turned around, and then I was paying attention to what was going on.
In fact, you weren't even aware the gun was loaded.
No.
You also testified to an incident in November of 2021.
I did.
This incident involved Drew Cantrell leaving a loaded gun on the sales counter.
Yes.
However, you weren't there for that incident.
Well, I heard the reprimand for it.
Redirecting me back to my question, you weren't there for that incident when Drew Cantrell left the gun on the sales counter.
I was not there when Drew Cantrell left the gun on the couch.
You did not see the incident happen.
No.
In fact, the only way you heard about it was by Skylar Pullman reprimanding Drew Cantrell in her office.
Yes.
However, you can't be 100% sure it was Drew Cantrell in that office.
I heard Skylar mention Drew's name a couple times in the reprimanding, so I figured that Skylar was talking to Drew.
Did you see Drew Cantrell in that office?
No, I did not.
Did you hear Drew Cantrell's voice in that office?
No, I just heard their name mentioned.
Now, let's talk about your gun experience. You have no knowledge of guns, right?
I do not.
Yet you are testifying against Drew Cantrell's gun use.
Yes, it
Objection,
doesn't.
Your Honor, relevance may be heard.
Yes.
Mr. Hernandez's testimony to Drew Cantrell's knowledge of guns has no relevance in today's case, as today the plaintiff is proving the negligent hiring, supervision, and retention of Drew Cantrell towards Shooting Star Gun Club, and this has no bearing over that.
Your Honor, I'm willing to reword the question.
Sustained the.
You've never held a gun.
No, I have not.
You've never shot a gun.
No, I don't need to. I know Taekwondo.
You've never taken a safety training course with Drew Cantrell.
I have not.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Anything further from the plaintiff?
Nothing further, Your Honor.
You may step down.
Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Dr. Morgan Johnson.
Just 1 minute, let us finish, please.
Of course.
Counsel may call your next witness.
Before proceeding, may my co-counsel set up the easel for demonstratives?
Counsel, if you need to move when they're using the demonstrative, you can.
Plaintiff calls Dr. Morgan Judd to the stand.
Dr. Judd?
Good afternoon, Dr. Judd. Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself to the members of the jury.
My name is Dr. Morgan Jett. I hold a PhD in public policy, and I'm currently employed as an associate professor at Imperial State University's Center for Gun Violence Prevention.
Do you have a background in gun safety?
Of course. In addition to my decade of experience with the ATF, I've also written and researched for several prestigious institutions, including the Brookings Institute, Everytown for Gun Safety, the Washington Post, the Guardian,
The list goes on, really.
Your Honor, according to Court Order 12, Dr. Judd is qualified as an expert in firearm safety and therefore is allowed to testify under Rule 702. Therefore, the plaintiff offers to tender her as an expert in firearm safety.
I think there's no objection,
No objection.
but this is so tender.
What's your role in today's case?
I was called by counsel for Justice Carbo to discuss whether or not Ms. Carbo's injury was a direct result of Shooting Star Gun Club's negligence in hiring and retaining Drew Cantrell.
And what, if any, materials did you review prior to your testimony today?
I was given access to the affidavit of Drew Cantrell, the depositions of Justice Carbo and Skylar Coleman, as well as exhibits 1 through 22 and exhibit 23, which is my curriculum vitae.
Well, Dr. Judd, let's talk about gun safety. Are there bare minimums for safety practices when handling a firearm?
Of course, there are 5 what I like to call cardinal rules of gun safety. Things that are required to be taught in gun safety training courses, universal rules. Never point a firearm at another individual unless you intend to shoot. Always keep a firearm unloaded when not in use. Always use a firearm safety mechanism. Never pull the trigger until you're prepared to shoot. And always be fully aware of your surroundings before shooting.
From your analysis of case materials, did Drew Cantrell ever violate any of these rules prior to May 28, 2022?
Unfortunately, yes. In May of 2021, Drew Cantrell pointed a firearm at a coworker. Again, in November of 2021, Drew Cantrell took a loaded firearm out of the gun range and into the store.
Your Honor, permission for my co-counsel to display an enlarged version of Exhibit 8. It's already been entered. Dr. Judd, do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, I do.
What is it?
It's a copy of the gun range rules Shooting Star has posted inside of their own gun range.
Permission for Dr. Judd to step up to make use of the demonstrative?
It's fine.
Go that way.
Great. Dr. Judd, from your analysis of case materials, did Drew Cantrell ever violate any of the rules listed on this sign prior to May 28, 2022?
Yes, Drew Cantrell violated this first bullet point about treating every gun as if it's loaded. Point to only point at something if you want to destroy it, and the 5th, if it's loaded, leave it on the line.
Please read the notice at the bottom of this sign.
It states failure to abide by the above rules may result in removal from the facility and denial of future shooting privileges.
Thank you, Dr. Judd. Please be seated. From your analysis of case materials, was Shooting Star aware of Drew Cantrell's rule violation?
Yes, we know this because Shooting Star issued a memorandum to Drew Cantrell stating that further violations of their company policy could result in her termination. The owner of Shooting Star, Miss Coleman, even issued a text message to Miss Cantrell stating that she didn't want to hear about any more of Miss Cantrell's.
Your Honor, assumes facts not in evidence. May I explain?
Yes.
Your Honor, opposing counsel, specifically this witness, is testifying to specific contents of an exhibit that have not yet been admitted in today's case, and therefore they are assuming facts not in evidence. And I would ask that if they are going to do so, they do admit that exhibit in evidence prior.
Your Honor, may be heard. If I may make an offer of proof. Now that Dr. Judd has mentioned the exhibit, I'm going to be showing it to her and entering it into evidence.
Let's go ahead and do that before we ask about it. I'm going to sustain the objection.
Of course, Your Honor.
Move to strike from the record.
So stricken.
Dr. Judd, please flip to Exhibit 18 in your exhibit binder. I'm there, counsel. Do you recognize this exhibit?
I do.
What is it?
It's a copy of the text exchange between Miss Coleman and Miss Cantrell.
Is it a true and accurate representation of that text conversation?
Yes, it is.
Plaintiff moves Exhibit 18.
The objection.
Objection, Your Honor.
May I be heard, Your Honor? This is an admission by a party opponent.
I agree. Objection overruled.
Now, Dr. Judd, was anything notable about this conversation to you?
Yes. As I was saying before, Miss Coleman makes a statement, "I don't want to hear about any more of your mistakes again today," in addition to implying that If she wasn't fully booked in shop, she wouldn't have entrusted the safety training course to Miss Cantrell at all.
Now, Dr. Judd, in your professional opinion, what actions should Shooting Star have taken in response to Drew Cantrell's rule violation?
Frankly, Shooting Star should have fired Miss Cantrell, or at the very minimum, suspended and retrained her.
Did Shooting Star take the proper action?
Unfortunately not.
Dr. Judd, let's talk about the safety training course that Drew Cantrell taught on May 28th, 2022. Did you identify any issues with the setup of this course?
Yes. First and foremost, that Shooting Star appointed an instructor that they knew had previous safety violations on her record to teach a course simultaneously to 2 students at once. It was an accident waiting.
Did you identify any issues with Cantrell's behavior during the course?
Yes. I determined through my evaluation of the case materials that Miss Cantrell flinched before her initial shot at the firearm.
In your professional opinion, what caused this to happen?
2 things. First, Miss Cantrell's mismanagement of the firearm, and secondly, her lack of awareness around her surroundings.
Objection, Your Honor, and proper expert opinion, may I explain? Your Honor, this witness is an expert in firearm safety, however, they are testifying to the actual gun use and mishandling of the firearm that occurred during May 28th, 2022, and she's not an expert in that, and she cannot testify to anything besides the objective way that Drew Cantrell handled the firearm and not make an expert opinion.
Your Honor, may I be heard? Dr. Judd is an expert in gun safety, and therefore it is well within her expertise to understand how to safely handle a firearm.
I agree, objection overruled.
Yes.
Well, Dr. Judd, let's take those 2 points one by one. How did Miss Cantrell not be aware of her surroundings?
Miss Cantrell took her shot without ensuring that the people in her vicinity could not interfere with or would not be harmed by her bullet. In fact, she placed one of her students immediately to her right, and as a result, Miss Carbo was shot.
How did Miss Cantrell mishandle the fire?
As I was saying, Miss Cantrell flinched before her initial shot. This meant that when the recoil of the firearm hit her, she was unable to manage it properly, and it skewed off to the right. Then, when she attempted to tighten her grip to regain control of the firearm, she discharged it a second time into Miss Carbo's leg.
Dr. Judd, in your professional opinion, Shooting Star's actions lead to Justice Carbo's injury?
Yes.
Objection, Your Honor, ultimate issue, may I explain?
Yes.
Your Honor, this witness just stated that Shooting Star's actions led to the injury of Justice Carbo in today's case after discussing the retention of Shooting Star, and therefore that is the ultimate issue that is only for the jury to decide.
Your Honor, may I be heard? Dr. Judd is offering an expert opinion. She's an expert in gun safety. She's only going to be testifying from the viewpoint of gun safety. It's what Shooting Star should have done different.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
Can you repeat the question?
Did shootings, in your professional opinion, did Shooting Star's actions lead to Justice Carbo's?
Objection sustained.
Dr. Judd, is there anything you think Shooting Star should have done different?
Of course. I believe that Shooting Star should have ensured that their instructors were properly trained before allowing them to become instructors. And in fact, Shooting Star could have fired Miss Cantrell the moment they learned she was violating their basic safety procedure. But they didn't.
Thank you, Dr. Judd. I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor. Permission to move the demonstrative.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You bet.
A good afternoon, Dr. Judd.
Good afternoon.
Now, I want to start off by discussing your opinion about gun violence. It's true that when coming to a conclusion in today's case, you would agree it's important to remove any bias involved.
Of course.
And you, of course, would be sure to do that, wouldn't you?
I did, yes.
So before we talk about your conclusion in today's case, let's talk about how you became involved. Now, it's true, you were not always a firearm safety expert.
No, I was not.
Right, in 2011, you could say the trajectory of your career changed because of a personal incident that happened to you.
Yes, this is true.
That incident being the unfortunate death of one of your loved ones to gun violence.
Yes, my niece.
sorry, but this incident made you realize that enforcing our current gun laws could be wholly insufficient.
Yes, I believe that advocacy was a pathway to making sure that no other family ever went through with find it.
Right, it led you to the conclusion that new gun laws need to be enforced.
Yes,
This is because you want to stop the scourge of gun violence.
yes, of course.
Now let's talk about your actual conclusion. You testified on direct examination about 2 incidents involving Drew Cantrell.
I did.
Neither of those 2 incidents occurred during one of her firearm safety courses.
No, they did not.
In fact, neither one of them occurred in the gun range at all, correct?
No, one of them did start in the gun range. Drew Cantrell took a loaded firearm out of the gun range and into the store.
But you would agree that when that firearm was in the store, that was not in the gun range.
No, it was
You yourself said that no one really was around us.
that is true, yes.
It is true that following these instances, Ms. Cantrell was formally reprimanded.
She was.
And following that formal write-up, she never repeated either of those safety violations prior to May 28th.
No, she never repeated the same violation.
So that's the answer to my question.
Yes,
And it's true that her firearm safety certificate was never revoked.
it wasn't.
So when she was leading a firearm safety course on May 28th, she still had all of her certifications.
Of course, I would be even more concerned if she did.
And now, Dr. Judd, you talked a lot on direct examination about what Shooting Star could control, so I'd like to dive into what Shooting Star couldn't control. You would agree that every firearm, regardless of make and model, handles differently.
Yes,
And a further variation could be caused by things like a brand, age, and prior amount of use.
of course. That's why instructors need to be trained.
Right, but all of these further variations can lead to differences in the amount of strength needed to pull the trigger.
Yes,
All of these differences can lead to a difference in the strength of the recoil of gun.
yes,
It's so that even 2 guns of the same make and model will not handle the same.
I would disagree. I would say, having used guns myself, that they do function roughly the same way.
It's your testimony today that it's possible that 2 guns of the same make and model will handle the same.
Roughly, yes.
You prepared an affidavit for today's case.
I did.
You would recognize that affidavit if I showed it to you today.
I would.
Your Honor, at this time, of the record reflect that I report the truth is wrong and what is completely marked as an affidavit.
The record shall so reflect.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness?
You may.
This is your affidavit, correct?
Yes, it is.
You recognize it because you wrote it.
I did.
And this is your signature right there.
That would be.
My apologies. Is your signature?
It is.
You are aware that you had up until trial today to change or alter anything in there.
I am.
You realize that you were to include any and all relevant information.
Of course.
Please read silently while I read aloud. Line 122. Because of this, no 2 guns will feel exactly the same when shot, not even 2 guns of the exact same make and model. Did I read that correctly, Doctor?
Yes, but I do believe you misconstrued what I intended to mean with that sentence. Yes, no 2 guns will work exactly the same, but that's exactly what I mean. That 2 guns, roughly, even though they might have different make and model, might function almost the exact same way and differ in slightly different variations. Never to the point where you might recoil so badly you shoot your student.
But it's true that you're not an expert in firearm mechanics.
No, but I am safe.
So you cannot say that with 100% certainty, as you do not know the mechanics of the Glock 22 in today's case.
Not this Glock 22, but what I can say with certainty is that gun safety precautions would have prevented this incident.
So once again, no 2 guns will handle exactly the same, even the same gun, the exact model.
Not
Objection,
exactly.
Your Honor. Under 702, opposing counsel just said that Dr. Judd is not qualified to testify to gun mechanics, and now she's asking about gun mechanics.
What's your question?
So, Your Honor, I said that no guns, even guns of the exact same make and model will handle the same. However, it has just been shown that she has said that, and as opposing counsel did ask her about the handling of the firearm in May 28th on direct examination and argued that that was within her expertise, I would argue the same thing as she said, that she is an expert in gun safety, and I'm not asking her today to come to any expert conclusion on gun manufacturers.
Your Honor, may I be heard? What I asked about on direct examination was the handling of a firearm. As it pertains to gun safety, she is able to testify as to how to handle a firearm. Now, this is specifically asking about the mechanics of a firearm. Whether or not two different guns could have different recoils and handle differently, that is not gun safety. Handling a firearm is gun safety. Recoil of a firearm is not gun safety. That is gun.
Your Honor, if I may proffer
No, I don't need anything further. Objection overruled. Thank you.
yes, Your Honor, allow me to re-ask the question. It's true that no two guns will operate the same, even if they are the exact same make.
Keyword, they're being exactly the same. They do function roughly the same way.
You would agree that all of these variations that I just mentioned make a gun malfunction a possibility.
No, I would not agree on that.
But you can't say with 100% certainty that variations in gun handling do not make gun malfunctions a possibility.
There are a lot of things I can't say with 100% certainty, but yes.
So once again, in your opinion, even an expert in firearm safety can experience a gun malfunction.
Yes, that is possible.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further.
Thank you, counsel. Any redirect?
Yes, Your Honor. Dr. Judd, do you believe in banning the usage of all guns?
No, of course not. I strongly believe in our Second Amendment rights. What I like to say I believe in specifically is that we need better education to teach about how to use a firearm so that nobody uses firearms recklessly or in a way that endangers other individuals.
Does the fact that Drew Cantrell's prior rule violation occurred outside of safety training courses change your opinion that Drew Cantrell was incompetent?
Of course not. Just because they didn't directly harm another individual does not mean they weren't serious red flags that Skylar Coleman and Shooting Star should have ignored.
Does the fact that no one was around when Drew Cantrell brought a loaded gun out of the range change the fact that it's a rule violation?
Again, of course not. Just because you break a fundamental rule of gun safety when no one is around doesn't mean you didn't break the rule.
Finally, Dr. Judd, do you believe that it was a gun malfunction that caused the second bullet to be fired on May 28th, 2020?
No, I do not. Regardless of the make and model, no differences between blocks are so severe that a recoil would have caused a gun safety instructor.
In proper expert opinion and on cross-examination, I did state that a gun malfunction is a possibility. However, she is coming to a definitive conclusion about today's case of whether that gun did actually malfunction or not. As she's an expert in firearm safety, she cannot make a definitive expert conclusion.
No, maybe her.
No, I think you opened the door, counselor. I'm going to rule the objection.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Judd, did you get to finish your answer?
No, I didn't.
Please continue.
As I was saying, no difference in make and model could cause a recoil so strong that the instructor points their firearm in a different direction and discharges the second time.
Thank you, Dr. Judd. I have no further questions.
Thank you, counselor. Anything further from the defense?
No recross, sir.
Next witness, be excused.
Yes, yes, sir.
At this time, Your Honor, the plaintiff rests their case in chief.
All right, at this time, we will take a 5-minute break, so everybody be back at 5:06.
Oh, great, okay. So like right now. Right now. Oh, yeah, I think so. Yeah. Is it like still out of the? It's not like scared. You're still like kind of confident. Okay, but that worked. I think I might have been mad. What? Nice to do this. You said really once, and it's like, I see someone's doing it, it's like, what is it? Yes, but also if you would lens the kind of that much. Yeah.
Everybody can return, please. Are you guys? Are you back? Okay. All right. Before we start, let us know how much time that has remaining.
The plaintiff is 28 minutes and 58 seconds remaining. That says 38 minutes and 8 seconds.
Right? Thank you. Everybody back? Yes. Shooting Star Gun Club, you may now present your case as to the special instructions you're required to call Drew Cantrell as your first witness. Are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense would like to call Mr. Clinton. Skip that. Your Honor, may I proceed?
Right?
Good afternoon. Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Good afternoon. My name is Drew Cantrell.
Ms. Cantrell, what do you do for a living?
I work as a firearms safety instructor at Shooting Star Gun Club.
When did you become a firearm safety instructor?
That was in August of 2021.
Before you were hired, did you have any knowledge of basic firearm operations?
Oh, yes, ma'am. I've actually been handling firearms my whole life. My dad used to take me hunting as a kid, and I got really into target practice in high school.
Because of that, were you also familiar with the basics of firearm safety?
Of course I was, yes.
Did you ever receive any certifications?
Yes, ma'am. I received a firearms safety certificate, and then after that, a firearms instructor certificate.
So do you have experience leading these firearm safety courses?
Yes, it's my job.
Now, I would like to discuss your time at Shooting Star. Have there ever been any incidents involving gun safety?
Yes, ma'am. There were 2 incidents.
Could you please describe in detail the first incident for the jury?
So one day in May 2021, I was inspecting a handgun as part of my job as a sales clerk at the time. The gun was pointing in the direction of the shop floor, but Coleman misunderstood this. Coleman all of a sudden came out of their office, started screaming at me, telling me to never point a gun at another person again, but I wasn't pointing a gun at another person. It was pointed in the direction of the floor.
Ms. Cantrell, could you please describe the second incident in detail for the jury as well?
In November of 2021, I had just finished teaching a firearms safety course. Everyone had left, and I made the mistake of taking the gun back into the shop without emptying the magazine. Again, it was a mistake on my part. No one was there, and I thought it would be safe, but I should have known better.
Ms. Cantrell, following these 2 misunderstandings, were you ever formally written up?
Yes, ma'am. I received a warning letter.
And after receiving that warning letter, did you ever repeat a safety violation?
No, I did not.
Ms. Cantrell, did either of these violations occur during one of your courses?
No, they did not.
Did either of them, to clarify, occur in the gun range at all?
No, neither of them.
And was your firearm safety certifications ever revoked at any time during your time at Shooting Star?
No, ma'am. I continue to be a firearms safety instructor.
Now, Ms. Cantrell, I would like to discuss with you today of May 28th, 2022. Let's just walk through what happened that day for the jury. Were you working in the range that morning?
Yes, Skylar Coleman told me that 2 new gun owners would be taking my safety training course, Justice Carbo and Nick Alred.
Before beginning your safety course that morning, did you share any basic rules of gun safety with them?
Once I took Justice Carbo and Nick Alred into the shooting range, I laid down some basic ground rules for gun safety. Those being to treat every gun as if it's loaded, never place your finger on the trigger unless you're ready to shoot, and only shoot it. Point the gun at your target.
Are these rules that you shared with them rules that you always share with your customers?
Yes, they are.
Before starting your course, did you additionally share any rules or guidelines that pertain to the gun mechanics?
No, ma'am.
Did you ever mention anything else before starting the safety course?
Well, I gave them some safety equipment, earplugs and goggles. And I also told them that they might flinch in anticipation of the gun, since they were both new gun owners. They'd never handled guns before.
So, Ms. Cantrell, after sharing those guidelines with them, what did you do?
And then I started my demonstration.
What happened when you started your demonstration?
Well, when I went and I pulled the trigger for my first shot, the gun recoil was stronger than anything I'd ever felt before. This caused the gun to redirect its barrel to the right, along with Justice Carbo bumping into me. They flailed wildly. I had never seen anything like that before.
Ms. Cantrell, have you ever felt that strong of a recoil from a handgun?
Never, and I've handled a lot of those in my life.
Ms. Cantrell, what happened after the gun redirected?
Well,
Then, the gun fell out of my hands and Justice Carbo was shot.
Cantrell, has anything like this ever occurred during your safety courses in the past?
No, ma'am. Everyone has always been safe, completely.
So what do you personally think caused the second shot that day, Ms. Cantrell?
Well, I only pulled the trigger once. There must have been something wrong with that gun.
Objection, Your
Recoil-
Honor. 701 improperly witnessed.
Your Honor, this witness is not making an improper opinion as she was the one who conducted the firearm safety course and shot the firearm, and I'm simply asking her opinion on what could have happened. She is not coming to any conclusion in all at today's case, and it is appropriate to ask for that.
Your Honor, maybe her opinion is a conclusion that she is not qualified to make. And although she was handling the firearm, she never inspected it. She is not an expert in firearms mechanics. She is not qualified to draw a conclusion as to there being any malfunction with the firearm.
I'm gonna overrule the objection. I think she can give her personal opinion as to what she thinks happened. You are certainly free to cross her on that information.
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Cantrell, would you like me to re-ask the question?
Sure.
So in your opinion, what do you think caused the second shot that went off that day?
Again, I only pulled the trigger once. Something else had to have happened with the gun.
Ms. Cantrell, in that case, is there anything that you could have done differently to prevent that?
No, nothing.
Thank you, Ms. Cantrell. Thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing. Thank you, Counsel.
Cross-examination, Your Honor?
Yes.
Ms. Cantrell, in May of 2021, you were reprimanded for pointing a gun at another employee. Is that true?
That is what I was written up for. However, that didn't happen.
That is what you were written up for, though. Is that correct?
Yes, it was.
You weren't mandated to any retraining?
No, it wasn't necessary.
Well, that wasn't my question. My question was you weren't mandated to any. Is that true?
No, ma'am, I was not.
You weren't suspended from employment at Shooting Star?
No, I wasn't.
And 3 months later, you were promoted to firearms safety instructor. Is that true?
I was. I'm very proud of that.
Promotion that occurred with no formal training?
Ma'am, I had a firearm safety certificate, as well as a firearm instructor certificate.
But to clarify, you never received any formal training courses. Is that correct?
Not necessarily.
Now, no employee of Shooting Star ever asked you about your prior employment at Huron Motors. Is that true?
No, they didn't.
You were relieved when they didn't ask you, right?
I was a little bit.
It's because you were fired for drinking on the job.
That's what they said they fired me for.
Objections to the proper character evidence and Your Honor, the opposing counsel is offering pieces of this witnesses of prior misdemeanors in today's case, which is improper character evidence, and this has no bearing on today's case, in whether or not Shooting Star negligently retained, hired, or supervised Drew Cantrell, and additionally, before trial, they did not offer us the character evidence form in which they must show the character evidence that they wish to offer in trial today, and they did not so.
Did you submit the form?
No, Your Honor, but this isn't being offered for Drew Cantrell's character. If I may make an offer of proof. Today, it's the plaintiff's contention that Shooting Star did not take the proper steps to inquire about Ms. Cantrell during the interview process. This isn't being used to show anything about Drew Cantrell's character. In fact, we'd be happy for limiting instructions to be placed on it. And it's only being used to show what Shooting Star could have discovered had they taken further steps to inquire about Drew Cantrell, and had they taken those steps, how it could have changed their hiring process.
But once again, Your Honor, they are offering it for this witness's character, that they could have asked these questions without specifically mentioning the former misdemeanors. And once again, they did not tell us ahead of trial that they were going to offer character evidence.
Your Honor, maybe.
No, I'm gonna sustain the objection.
Yes, sir. Move to strike.
So stricken.
And Ms. Cantrell, no employee of Shooting Star ever asked you about any criminal records. Is that true?
Not directly. They ran a background check.
Objection, Your Honor. The witness is speculating. She has no personal knowledge as to whether or not Shooting Star ran a background check.
Your Honor, this witness would have personal knowledge of the Shooting Star ran a background checks on her when they fired her.
Your Honor, maybe her. She may have personal knowledge of what form she filled out, of what she directly did. But she has no way of knowing whether or not that background check was actually run. And if she does, that foundation has never been laid. She does not have this personal knowledge.
I believe it is common knowledge that when a background check is run, that a former crime do pop up on that background check, and she may testify her personal knowledge, as well as I believe she did state that they ran a background check on her. She would know if Shooting Star did so when they hired her.
Your Honor, her? As opposing counsel says, a background check was run, a criminal record would have come up. Now, I just asked the witness about whether or not she was ever asked about a criminal record. She stated that she was not asked about a criminal record. It's the plaintiff's contention that that background check was never run and no sufficient foundation has been laid as to how this witness would have knowledge of that background check being run, as she did not see Coleman or any employee of Shooting Star running that background check. Briefly.
Your Honor, this witness does not have to have specifically been asked about her prior criminal record in order for there to have been a background check in which it popped up.
I think you opened the door with your question, so I'm gonna open it to your question.
Yes, Your Honor. But now, Ms. Cantrell, you say that they run a background check. Did you ever watch Skylar Coleman run that background check?
Ma'am, I filled out forms from the Imperial State Department, which looked like they were from a background check. I didn't follow her into the back office to see what she did with those.
So just to clarify for the jury, you never saw that background check.
No,
So you have no direct way of knowing whether or not it was actually.
I guess not.
Now let's talk about your times as a firearm safety instructor. In November of 2021, you brought a loaded gun off the range. Is that true?
Yes, ma'am.
This violates basic safety protocol.
I learned that and I never made that mistake again.
So it's yes.
Yes, ma'am, it is.
But you actually said on direct examination that you thought it would be safe. Is that true?
Not exactly. At the time, there were no customers. Everyone had left. At the time, I thought it was safe, but later, immediately, I realized it wasn't.
So that is a yes. At the time, you thought it would be safe.
At the time,
You thought it would be safe to break a basic safety protocol.
not in those words.
Well, that is what happened, isn't it?
I broke that rule and I learned from my mistake.
You broke the rule that at the time you thought would be safe to break. Is that true?
I didn't think it would be safe to break. I wasn't thinking about it at the time.
Well, you just said that at the time you thought it would be safe. Is that true? So you were thinking about it.
I wasn't thinking about the rule. I was thinking about my actions.
Now, Ms. Cantrell, when you brought this loaded gun off the range, you weren't mandated to any retrain.
I was not.
You weren't suspended from employment at Shooting Star.
I wasn't.
And because you weren't suspended, you were still serving as a safety instructor on May 28th, 2022, correct?
It was a minor enough mistake. I don't think they would have fired me.
So it's yes, you were still serving as an instructor.
I was.
This is when you were instructed to teach a safety course that a safety course to Justice Carbo and Nick Allred.
That was on May 28th, that safety course.
Yes, on May 28th, 2022, a safety course to Justice Carbo and Nick Allred.
Yes, ma'am.
Now you were aware that Justice Carbo was a complete rookie, right?
Yes, they were both new gun owners.
Now directing your attention to what's been previously entered into evidence as Exhibit 18.
Oh, yes.
Now, in this message, Skylar Coleman says to you, I do not want to hear about any more of your mistakes. Is that correct?
Was any of your mistakes? Yes.
Now, after she sent that text message, she assigned you to teach a safety course. Is that true?
Not after. I was already planning to demonstrate that.
Well, despite this text message, you were assigned to teach a safety course.
Yes, ma'am. I
And
was.
as an instructor, you were entirely responsible for the safety of this course.
That's my job. I was teaching them safety.
Now let's talk about the safety course. As part of the course, you have to demonstrate how to shoot a firearm. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
You told your students where to stand.
I did.
You placed Justice Carbo to your right,
I did.
and then you fired your first shot.
I also placed Nick Allred to their right so that they could both have the best view. And then I began my demonstration.
That's a yes, you fired your first shot after placing your students in their position.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you check your firearm prior to shooting?
Yes, ma'am.
So you would have noticed if there were any issues with the firearm. Is that true?
Not exactly. Checking the firearm means ensuring that the safety is on and that if it is loaded or unloaded, you can't exactly see some of these errors.
Well, you weren't aware of any errors at the time of shooting. Is that correct?
I was not.
And then You fired the gun,
I did.
and the gun redirected to the right.
Yes, the recoil was really violent and I was bumped into.
So to clarify, yes, it redirected to the right.
Yes, ma'am.
And then a second shot went off.
It did.
Justice Carbo was shot in the leg. Is that true?
Unfortunately, yes.
Did you ensure that everybody was in a safe position prior to firing your first shot?
Ma'am, I had placed Justice Carbo and Nick Alred to my right so that they could see where I was pointing the gun.
Well, Ms. Cantrell, wouldn't you agree that it's the responsibility of anybody handling a firearm to be aware of your surroundings?
Yes, ma'am.
And wouldn't you agree that as firearm safety instructor, you're responsible for the safety of this court?
Yes, ma'am.
So did you check before shooting your first shot that everybody was in a safe position?
Ma'am, I had placed them there, and before I went to shoot my firearm, I'd seen that they were there. Justice Carbo must have moved closer to me while I was focusing on my firearm.
So, Ms. Cantrell, you weren't aware of this.
I was when I wasn't focusing on my firearm.
But before you fired your first shot, you just said you weren't aware of Justice Carbo moving closer. Is that true?
Ma'am, I was focusing on the firearm in my hand.
Well, that wasn't my question. My question was, you weren't aware of Justice Carbo moving closer. Is that correct?
I didn't look behind me while pointing the gun in front of me. No,
So you weren't aware.
I guess not.
And it was your responsibility to be aware. Is that true?
Well, not exactly.
Ms. Cantrell, didn't you tell me that it's the responsibility of anybody handling a firearm to be aware of their surroundings?
At that point, I was focusing on the firearm,
Objection,
like
Your
I
Honor, the
said.
witness is being non-responsive. The question called for a yes or no. I was simply clarifying that it's the responsibility of anyone being aware of a firearm anyone handling a firearm to be aware of their surroundings. Her answer had nothing.
Your Honor, just because this is a cross-examination does not mean this witness simply has to answer yes or no, and she may feel that this answer requires more than a yes or no answer to give a fully completed answer. And Your Honor, opposing counsel badgering the witness by not allowing her to complete her answer.
Your Honor, maybe heard.
No. I think we've asked this question several times and she's given you several variations of the answer. I'm gonna overrule the objection.
Yes, Your Honor. So was Justice Carbo in a safe position when you checked that if she was in a safe position?
Ma'am, I placed her to my right.
So was she in a safe position when you checked?
Objection, Your Honor, asked to answer.
Your Honor, maybe heard. The witness hasn't given a clear answer. This is a good question.
Your Honor, this witness has answered this question multiple times. Just because it is not the answer that opposing counsel is looking for does not mean that she has not answered.
Your Honor, maybe heard. I've not asked this question. I've asked if she was aware of her surroundings. I've asked if she checked. I have not asked if Justice Carbo was in a safe position when she checked. This is a new question, and she's not giving a clear answer, and therefore I'm clarifying for the jury.
Your Honor, I do believe that she has discussed with my witness and asked her questions about whether or not Justice Carbo was in a safe position prior to this question.
I'm going to overrule the objection and if witness, please answer the question and then you may elaborate further if necessary.
Ms. Cantrell, all I'm asking is, was Ms. Carbo in a safe position when you checked?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Cantrell. I have no further questions.
Either right.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
May I proceed?
You may.
Ms. Cantrell, why do you think Ms. Coleman reprimanded you for two mere misunderstandings?
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of personal knowledge.
Your Honor, I believe it is this witness's personal knowledge that she was the one who was reprimanded, and therefore she would know, and she is allowed to give her opinion on why she thinks she was reprimanded.
Your Honor, maybe heard. She would be completely speculating as to why she was reprimanded. She has no idea what Ms. Coleman's state of mind was.
Your Honor, she is not being asked about Ms. Coleman's state of mind. She simply, I asked this witness why she believes that she was reprimanded just because they were misunderstanding. It is not calling for speculation into the mindset of speculating.
I think you can ask her what she was reprimanded for. I don't think you can ask her why she thinks she was reprimanded. I do think that that's causing some speculation. I'm going to suspend the objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Cantrell, in your opinion, were you reprimanded for anything more than a misunderstanding?
No, ma'am. I made a minor mistake and there was a misunderstanding. Coleman reprimanded me for those.
Ms. Cantrell, does the fact that you broke one rule over the span of 3 years, in your opinion, make you unqualified to lead a safety force?
No, I I made a mistake. I learned from that mistake, and I continue to be a firearms safety instructor.
Control during that firearm safety course. Oh, why were you not aware of if she moved before you fired the shot?
Ma'am, I was focusing on where I was pointing the firearm. I couldn't look behind me at that point in time. I had already placed them and told them not to move.
Ms. Cantrell, is it your responsibility to control the movements that Justice Carbo chooses to make?
Not necessarily at that point.
Carbo, in your opinion, would checking the firearms have revealed a mechanical malfunction that happened during the shot?
Objection, Your Honor. 701, you properly witnessed.
I think you opened the door with this crossing overall.
Mr. I'll just re-ask the question. In your opinion, would checking the firearm prior to the course have revealed a mechanical malfunction with the gun?
I couldn't see a malfunction. No.
Thank you, Ms. Cantrell. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, counsel. Anything further from the plaintiff?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may be excused, and you may return to your court if you like. Right, the business is over to this board. Defense, you may call your next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, the defense involves Skylar Coleman.
Ms. Coleman?
You may. Good afternoon. Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Good afternoon. My name is Skylar Coleman.
Could you tell the jury a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm born and raised from Huron, and I'm currently the owner of the Shooting Star Gun Club.
How long have you owned Shooting Star Gun Club?
My parents started the business way back in 1989, and then I took over in 2008.
Why did you choose to take over this business?
The right to protect yourself with a firearm has always been something that's really important to me, and I wanted to protect my hometown by providing people with that opportunity.
I'd like to talk about one of your employees. Do you have an employee named Drew Cantrell?
Yes, I do.
And when did you hire Drew Cantrell?
I hired Miss Cantrell in June of 2020.
What did this hiring process look like?
Well, I submitted a background check for Miss Cantrell. I had an interview process where I kind of asked her about her gun expertise, and she was good to go.
What position did you originally hire Drew Cantrell for?
Originally, I just hired her as a shop clerk. It was the lowest position I could give her, and I wanted to make sure she learned how we operate at Shooting Star.
And did she have the qualifications for this position?
Yes, like I said, it was the lowest position she could have. All she had to do was really check customers out and keep an inventory.
And did you ever promote Drew Cantrell?
Yes, I did.
When did you promote her?
I promoted Miss Cantrell in August of 2021, about a year after she had been working at Shooting Star.
And what position was she promoted to?
She was promoted to a firearm safety instructor.
And now, did she have the qualifications for this position?
Yes, I wanted to make sure that Miss Cantrell was extremely qualified for this position, so I made sure she observed other people who had taught this course before, so she could get real hand experience. And then I made sure she was certified not only in gun safety, but to also teach the course.
Now, Ms. Coleman, within your store, do you try to keep a safe environment?
Yes, I try to keep a safe environment for not only my employees, but also my customers. For my employees, I always offer a free training course with their weapon, and for my customers, I offer a free training course with the purchase of their weapon, and for my employees, I always write up any violations that occur.
Did you ever have to write up any violations that involved Drew Cantrell?
Yes, I did.
How many?
There were 2.
Could you tell the jury about the first incident?
Yes, the first incident was in May of 2021 when Miss Cantrell apparently pointed a firearm at another person. I never got a real story about it. I wasn't there at the time, but I just wanted to remain above board, so I wrote her up no matter what.
And what about the second incident?
The second incident was Miss Cantrell left a loaded gun on the shop counter. There was no one in the shop and no one was in any real danger at the time, but I made sure to write her up anyway.
And why did you make sure to write Miss Cantrell up for both of these incidents?
Like I said, at Shooting Star, we like to remain as above board as possible, even if I can't get a true story on the first incident. And at the second incident, no one was in any harm's way.
And did either of these incidents happen in the gun range?
No, they did not.
Did either of these incidents harm anybody?
No, nobody was harmed in either of these incidents.
Did either of these incidents occur during a safety training course?
No, not at all.
And why did you not fire Duke Cantrell after?
Although I take every violation seriously, these occurred over her 3 years at working at Shooting Star, and she never repeated a violation.
And now I'd like to talk about firearms. Did you sell a Glock 22 to Justice Carbone?
Yes, I did on May 28th.
And when you sold this gun, did you offer one of your complimentary training courses?
Of course, it's with every gun that you purchase, even if you've owned guns for years.
And who did you instruct to train this course?
I assigned Miss Cantrell to teach the training course.
And has Miss Cantrell taught training courses like this before?
Yes, at this point, Miss Cantrell had been teaching them for about a year, so I knew she was ready.
And why do you offer training courses at Shooting Star?
Well, I want to make sure that all of my customers are able to handle and operate their firearms safely and efficiently.
And how do your training courses account for different guns?
Well, like I said, every time someone purchases a firearm, whether they've owned guns for years or this is their first time buying a gun, I make sure that they know how to use their specific weapon because weapons can handle differently.
And are you aware of what happened during this training course?
Yes, I am.
And as the representative of Shooting Star, what did Shooting Star determine happened in this incident?
Shooting Star looked at all the evidence in today's case, and we found that to no fault of Miss Cantrell's did the gun go off a second time, and it was due to a malfunction.
Objection, Honor, improper lay witness opinion.
Go ahead.
May it be heard. Your Honor, Skylar Coleman is not an expert in gun mechanics, and they have no specialized knowledge of gun mechanics as a result. Therefore, Skylar Coleman cannot testify as to whether the gun malfunctioned.
Your Honor, as Skylar Coleman is the representative of Shooting Star, not only have they heard everything that has gone on in trial today, but Shooting Star, the company, has determined if Drew Cantrell was responsible, as they have not fired Drew Cantrell. So this is just rationally based on this business's perception as the owner of Shooting Star and the representative.
Yes, Your Honor.
Would you like me to re-ask the question?
Yes, please.
What did Shooting Star determine happened during this?
As I was saying, Shooting Star got together. We looked at all of the evidence in today's case, and we found that to no fault of Miss Cantrell or Shooting Star as a whole, did this accident occur. It was a malfunction of the gun that fired the second shot.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing.
Thank you.
Will Cross?
Yes, Your Honor.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Now, Ms. Coleman, you are the sole owner of Shooting Star Gun Club, right?
Yes, I am.
So was your decision to hire Drew Cantrell in 2020?
Yes, it was my decision.
It was also your decision to promote Drew Cantrell in 2021?
Yes, August, that's correct.
Now, when you hired Drew Cantrell, you never ran a background check, did you?
It was part of the interview process.
But in your affidavit, you never mentioned running any kind of background check during your hiring process. Do I have that right?
Hearsay, if I may be heard, this is the opposing counsel referencing a statement that is within Ms. Coleman's affidavit in today's case, which is a hearsay, as it is an out-of-court statement being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, Your Honor.
Your Honor, may be heard. This falls under the hearsay exception of prior inconsistent testimony, as I'm clarifying this witness's testimony.
I'm gonna allow a little latitude on cross objection.
Yes, Your Honor.
That's correct. I didn't mention that.
Now, when you promoted Drew Cantrell, you still didn't run any kind of background check, did you?
No, they were already hired and I knew their expertise.
Now, directing your attention to May of 2021, you issued a verbal warning because Drew Cantrell pointed a gun at another person in your shop. Do I have that right?
I don't believe that's what happened, but I wrote it up that way.
Now, Drew Cantrell broke a basic gun safety policy, didn't they?
I don't believe so. I believe there was a misunderstanding with the phrase shop floor. One person told me they had placed it around the shop floor like this, and another person had claimed they pointed it at the shop floor.
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive. My question asked this witness about whether or not Drew Cantrell had broken a basic gun safety policy. However, now this witness is lapsing beyond my question to clarify a misunderstanding regarding the gun floor.
I'm gonna overrule the objection. I think she answered and is providing some explanation for her answer. Objection overruled.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, according to what you wrote up Drew Cantrell for, Drew Cantrell had broken a basic gun safety policy. Do I have that right?
Yes, you have that right. Like I said, we like to remain as above board as possible, so I write everything up.
Now, you didn't fire Drew Cantrell after this incident, did you?
No, I did not.
You didn't suspend Drew Cantrell after this incident.
No, it wasn't necessary.
You didn't mandate any kind of retraining courses for Drew Cantrell.
No, I did not.
But what you did do was promote Miss Cantrell just 3 months later. Do I have that right?
Yes, after she had gotten certified, and I made sure she was observing other people teaching the course.
Now, Miss Coleman, 3 months after that, Miss Cantrell brought a loaded gun into your shop. Yes?
Yes, and once I wrote them up and had a formal conversation with them, they never repeated the instance.
Well, once again, Drew Cantrell broke one of Shooting Star's own gun safety policies, didn't they?
Yes, they did.
But you still didn't fire Miss Cantrell.
And no, I didn't. These two incidents were taken out of context over Miss Cantrell's entire career at Shooting Star, which was 3 years. And once she was written up and spoken to, she never repeated the violation.
You still didn't suspend Miss Cantrell?
No, I did not.
You didn't personally supervise Miss Cantrell?
No, I did. I watched some of her shooting courses and I made sure that she was doing her job correctly.
But you don't say this to anyone in your deposition, do you?
No, I do. I did watch some of her training courses and I could tell she was doing a great job.
But you didn't personally supervise her in order to correct her behavior, did you?
I would consider that as correcting her behavior. These occurred after the violations and I went in to make sure she was doing her job correctly when teaching safety training courses.
Now, Ms. Coleman, you didn't mandate any kind of retraining courses for your safety instructor, did you?
No, I did not.
And because you kept Ms. Cantrell, she was able to teach gun safety to Justice Carbo on May 28th.
Yes.
And it was during that May 28th incident that Justice Carbo was shot in the leg.
Yes, unfortunately due to a misfire of the gun.
Thank you, Ms. Coleman. Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further
Thank
questions.
you, counsel. Anything else? Yes, Your Honor, briefly. Now, Ms. Coleman, why did you write Cantrell up for the first incident in May of 2021?
I write all my employees up for every incident. My employees actually have a joke that I never let anything slide and I write everything up.
And now, was any incident that you reprimanded Drew Cantrell for ever repeated?
No, they were not, never.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing to please your counsel. Anything further?
No, Your Honor.
You may be excused.
Thank you.
Let's make calls next witness.
Yes, Your Honor, we will check this out this year. However, may I have a time check?
Yes, if you would like, tell us how much on both sides have remaining, that'd be great.
The defense has 45 minutes and 23 seconds. The plaintiff has 18 minutes and 38 seconds.
Your Honor, we need to demonstrate, may I have until it's set it up?
Yes.
Good afternoon. Would you please introduce yourself to the jury?
Good afternoon, my name is Jackie Stout.
Now, before we get into today's claims, tell the jury a bit about yourself.
Of course, I went to the military academy at West Point where I received a bachelor's degree in physics with a minor in physics, which is basically just the study of light. I then served in the military as an artillery officer for 7 years.
where I was deployed to Iraq and qualified as an instructor.
What did you do after you left the army?
After I left the army, I started my own firm, Staff Examiners LLC, in about 2010. There, I basically just focus on firearm operations and mechanics.
Could you briefly explain to the jury what are firearm operations?
Firearm operations deal with the mechanical aspect of how guns work. So basically, I'm an expert in firearm mechanics.
What certifications do you have?
I have certifications from the Huron Department of Justice and from the United States Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives.
Now that the jury knows your background, why are you here to testify today?
I'm here to testify because the defense Shooting Star Gun Club has retained me to provide my expert opinion on if Drew Cantrell complied with industry standards on May 28th, 2022, and if the sale of the Glock 22 to Justice Carbo violated Imperial's 2007 Act.
What happened on May 28th, 2022?
On May 28th, an employee of Shooting Star, Drew Cantrell, led a safety demonstration course to two novices in guns, Justice Carbo and Nick Alred. During that course, unfortunately, Drew Cantrell's gun misfired and shot Justice Carbo in the leg.
Oh, Your Honor, foundation has submitted that this witness is tendered as an expert in gun mechanics.
I'm assuming there's no objection complaint.
We have no objections to gun mechanics, Your Honor.
So tenured as an expert in gun mechanics.
What was the type of firearm you used during the safety course?
The firearm used was a Glock 22. It was Justice Carbo's firearm, but it was used by Drew Cantrell.
To further explain the firearm relevant in today's case, would you like a demonstrative to help you?
Yes, please.
Your Honor, at this time, may my co-counsel set up a demonstrative? May my witness also get down from the can?
Yes.
Now, let's break this down for the jury. What is an automatic firearm?
An automatic firearm fires continuously until the trigger is released. Additionally, there is no user action needed to be able to place a bullet into the chamber. Almost all of the actions are automatic.
What is a manual firearm?
A manual firearm requires the user to manually place a bullet into the chamber, either by placing it in there themselves or by pulling back a hammer. Now, it also has a trigger that fires one bullet per trigger pulled back.
What type of firearm is the Glock 22?
The Glock 22 is a semi-automatic firearm as pictured here. Semi-automatic firearms combine aspects of both manual and automatic firearms.
Are there any factors of the Glock 22 that make it a good starter gun?
Yes, it has a light trigger, which would make the force required to press down on the trigger less likely to move the person firing's arms. Additionally, it only fires one round, so it is less likely to accidentally fire again. And the recoil should be lighter than than most guns.
How does semi-automatics differ from other types of firearms, such as manuals and automatics?
Well, semi-automatics, as I said, combine aspects of both. Manual guns only fire once per round, like a semi-automatic. Additionally, like an automatic, you do not need to manually reload the gun.
Now, you mentioned that the Glock 22 has a lighter recoil. What is recoil?
Recoil is a fundamental aspect of how guns work. Think about Newton's third law. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. In order to fire the gun, the trigger is pulled, which brings the firing pin forward and ignites the gunpowder from the bullet, brings the bullet out of the chamber towards the barrel and eventually towards this target. This action has equal and opposite force against the user's hand, and that is what is called recoil.
Did you look into anything else while analyzing the Glock 22?
Well, I looked into the mechanics, so the light trigger and the recoil, and compared it to my analysis of what happened during the safety demonstration course.
Now that my witness is done with the demonstrative, may my co-counsel take down the demonstrative? May my witness also return to the stand? Thank you. I now want to talk about what happened during the safety course on May 28, 2022. What did you look into pertaining to the safety course?
Well, I looked into Drew Cantrell's experience, the mechanics of the Glock 22, of course, and how that could have played a role into the training course. Additionally, I looked into whether or not Drew Cantrell flinched prior to shooting the first shot.
You also said you looked into the light trigger earlier. What is a light trigger?
A light trigger is basically any trigger that requires less pressure to be able to fire the gun.
Could the light trigger affected the training course on May 2022?
In my expert opinion, a light trigger combined with an overly and unexpectedly violent recoil could make a gun misfiring not only possible but extremely likely.
Why do you believe that the recoil was unexpectedly violent?
For that, I turned to Drew Cantrell's affidavit, where he stated that the recoil was the most violent recoil that he'd ever experienced on a handgun before. This is highly unusual for a firearm of this make, model, and caliber.
Now, you mentioned Drew Cantrell's experience with firearms. How did Drew Cantrell's experience with firearms affect the training course?
Well, I looked into Drew Cantrell's experience and found that he had been shooting with firearms for over 2 decades. He has safety certifications to be able to teach these courses and to be able to properly fire guns. I found that with these experiences, he would likely be able to tell the difference between a unexpectedly violent recoil and an average one.
Did his experience play any other role?
Yes, I found that, actually, no, it did not.
Oh, geez. I now want to talk about how gun mechanics impact the firing of a weapon. What is the best way to deal with recoil?
The best way to deal with recoil is to maintain a firm and still grip on the weapon.
What happens when you don't maintain a firm grip on the weapon?
When you don't maintain a firm grip, that is called an overly relaxed grip and can cause the gun to slip and inadvertently change its point of direction. However, if a recoil is strong enough, due to a defect, it could also change the point of direction of a gun.
Now let's talk about one of the events that happened during the training course. Did Drew Cantrell flinch prior to the first 2 shots being fired?
I found that Drew Cantrell did not flinch prior to the first 2 shots, and instead that Justice Carbo hit Drew Cantrell's arm.
If you believe that Drew Cantrell did not flinch into Justice Carbo, how does that affect his experience with arms?
I'm sorry, can you restate that?
My apologies. If you believe that Drew Cantrell did not flinch prior to the first 2 shots, if you believe that Drew Cantrell did not flinch prior to the first 2 shots, let's see. After analyzing all the evidence, what conclusion did you come to?
Well, after learning of the light trigger, the recoil, Drew Cantrell's experience, and that Drew Cantrell did not flinch, I found that the gun misfired due to a factory defect. It was a misfire that it was a malfunction that caused the misfire, injured Carbo.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Ms. Staub, on direct examination, you were asked about the industry best practice when handling a handgun.
How so?
The industry best practice when handling a handgun is to have a firm grip. Yes?
Yes, that is the best way to deal with recoil. Recoil is, as I stated, a fundamental aspect of gun mechanics, so that is how I do deal with this.
Exactly. A firm grip allows the management of recoil. Yes?
That is correct.
And it's your contention that Drew Cantrell was compliant with industry best practices on May 28th. Yes?
Yes.
On direct examination, you also testified that the recoil of the Glock 22 was unmanageable for Drew Cantrell.
Yes, I decided that it was a factory defect that caused the unexpectedly violent recoil.
Well, that contradicts what you just said, Ms. Staub. So which is it? Did Drew Cantrell comply with industry practices and manage the recoil? Or did Drew Cantrell have an overly relaxed grip, which caused unmanageable recoil?
Well, as I stated on direct, an overly violent recoil can cause the gun to slip, and a overly violent recoil was caused by an gun malfunction. So he did comply with industry standards, but the gun still did slip.
I don't think you understood my question. So, in your report, you concluded that if an individual has an overly relaxed grip, it causes the recoil of the firearm to become unmanageable. Yes?
That is correct.
But is your conclusion that Drew Cantrell didn't have an overly relaxed grip? Instead, he had a firm grip, but somehow the recoil was still unmanageable?
Yes, the recoil was unmanageable due to an uncontrollable factor defect.
Well, let's talk a bit more about the recoil and Drew Cantrell's actions. It's your contention that Drew Cantrell did not flinch prior to firing the first shot on May 28th, yes?
That is correct.
Well, Ms. Staub, you read Ms. Cantrell's affidavit, didn't you?
I did.
And based on this, you concluded that the recoil was unmanageable.
Yes.
And in your report, you state that if there was a flinch, the recoil would have been unmanageable.
Sure.
You also state, Ms. Cantrell also states that when she fired the first shot, the barrel of the gun redirected to the right. Yes?
That is correct.
And you say if there was a flinch and an overly relaxed grip, the gun would have redirected. Yes?
Can you restate that?
Yes. You state, actually, let me make it a bit simpler for you, Ms. Stubb. You state that if there was a flinch, the gun barrel would have redirected to the right, yes?
Sure. However, I decided that there was not a flinch and that the gun redirected due to both Cantrell's arm being hit and also the recoil.
You also just testified that if there was an overly relaxed grip, the gun's pointing direction would have changed.
Actually, I testified that if there was an overly relaxed grip, sorry, let me rephrase, that the gun could have changed pointing direction due to the recoil.
You mentioned a couple times that Justice Carbo bumped into Drew Cantrell. Ms. Staub, nowhere in your report do you ever conclude that Justice Carbo was at fault for her own injury, do you?
No, I do not.
Nowhere in your report do you state that Justice Carbo bumped into Drew Cantrell.
No, I found from the affidavits of Avery Wen and Drew Cantrell that this is likely to have happened.
I'm not asking you about a conclusion you're coming to now, though, Ms. Staub. I'm asking you about what's in your report. You never conclude in your report that Justice Carbo bumped into Drew Cantrell.
No, I did not.
In fact, in your report, you conclude that the most likely cause of Justice Carbo's injury was Drew Cantrell pulling the trigger of the Glock 22. Yes?
That is correct. There is no other way for a gun to malfunction.
Oh, on direct examination, you were asked about the light trigger. Ms. Staub, isn't it true that a light trigger is a feature common to all Glock 22s?
Yes,
And you examined the handgun in this case, yes?
that is correct.
You concluded that the Glock 22 is a handgun that's safe for even beginners to use.
That is correct.
And it's your estimation that Drew Cantrell was more than a beginner with firearms, yes?
That is correct.
Thank you, Ms. Staub. Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, I have nothing further.
Thank you. Anything else from the defense?
Does the fact that Drew Cantrell couldn't contain a recoil necessarily mean he wasn't maintaining a firm grip?
I'm sorry, can you say that one more time?
Of course. Does the fact that Drew Cantrell couldn't contain a recoil necessarily mean that he wasn't maintaining a firm grip?
It does not. Recoil is an uncontrollable factor if there is a gun malfunction, such as there was today.
So what could have been the cause for the recoil?
The recoil was likely caused by a factory defect. It was a malfunction that led to this mistake.
Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Anything further from the plaintiff?
Yes, Your Honor, a recross. Ms. Staub, you keep referring to a factory defect. When you say factory defect, you're referring to the trigger, the Glock 22?
I am referring to the intense and uncontrollable recoil of the Glock 22.
But that intense and uncontrolled recoil, is it can you identify the specific feature of the Glock 22 that speaks to that uncontrollable recoil?
No, I could not.
Thank you, Ms. Staub. Thank you, Your Honor. At this time,
Anything else you would like to defend? No, Your Honor, at this time the defense rests. We will step down.
Right, we will take just a few minutes to transition to closings. It is getting very late, and then we'll have the closing ceremonies, so we will come back right at 6 in 3 minutes, so you have 3 minutes to prepare for closing arguments. And if we can get everybody back so that we can get out of here. Time for you guys to eat before anything else this evening. Okay, before we begin, Kathy, can you tell us how much that has remaining?
So pleasure has 15 minutes and 27 seconds remaining.
15 minutes and 27 seconds.
Correct. The plaintiff has 13 minutes and 47. I believe. Oh, sorry.
Minutes. Okay, I'm confused.
Your Honor, prior to plaintiff closing, may I set up our demonstration? Please.
So what, if any time, would you like to say for rebuttal argument?
Just any remaining time I have.
You bet.
Should have, could have, did not. Members of the jury, you've heard that Shooting Star Gun Club LLC had every opportunity to do the right thing, the safe thing. But even when it was clear what they should have done, what they could have done, they didn't. The long foreshadowed tragedy struck. Today, my client filed 2 causes of action against the defendant. First, the negligent hiring, supervision, and retention of Drew Cantrell, and second, the reckless entrustment of a firearm to Drew Cantrell. It was our burden to prove these claims to you with a preponderance of the evidence. Preponderance of the evidence just means that scale tips even slightly in our favor, You must find the defendant liable. The facts have established that we met this burden on both causes of action. Shooting Star should have known that Drew Cantrell was unfit to be hired. Skylar Coleman could have run a background check on Drew Cantrell. She claims she did, but in reality, she never asked Drew Cantrell anything about a background check. Skylar Coleman could have asked about Drew Cantrell's prior employment. She didn't. Shooting Star should have known that promoting Drew Cantrell to a safety instructor and retaining her would put others in danger. And they should have known this because there were 2 prior incidents in which Drew Cantrell violated both the basic rules of gun safety you heard from Dr. Judd and the rules listed on Exhibit 8. Shooting Star's own safety policy. Treat every gun as if it's loaded. Only point it if you want to destroy it. May of 2021, Drew Cantrell violated both of these rules. She pointed a gun, another employee. And then just 3 months later, with no formal training, Drew Cantrell became a gun safety instructor. That's when Drew Cantrell violated a 3rd rule. You don't take a loaded gun off the range. Drew Cantrell brought a loaded gun out of the range and into the gun store, and she even testified that she thought that would be a safe thing to do. She thought it'd be safe. Break safety policy. Notice at the bottom of Exhibit 8, it's been temporarily removed from the range or even deny all future shooting privileges to anyone who breaks these rules. Dr. Judd testified that at a minimum, Drew Cantrell should have been retrained. She showed a basic lack of respect for the rules and the dangers that guns hold. However, according to both Dr. Judd and Shooting Star's own safety policy, the best action Shooting Star could have taken would have been to fire Drew Cantrell. But they didn't. May 28th, 2022. We look to Exhibit 18. Skylar Coleman texts Drew Cantrell to tell them that they'll be teaching the safety course. She adds, "I don't want to hear about another one of your mistakes." Members of the jury, the morning that Justice Carbo was shot, Skylar Coleman was concerned about Drew Cantrell making yet another dangerous mistake. Now, the defense argues that Skylar Coleman couldn't have known that Drew Cantrell was incompetent, but this message from Coleman's words shows that she knew. Let's talk about the setup of the course. Before it even began, there were issues. For starters, Drew Cantrell, who Coleman knew to be incompetent, was teaching. Not only that, but she was teaching 2 students at once, splitting her attention. Then it came time to shoot the gun. Cantrell held up, but not properly. She flinched before the first shot to prove this. And she pulled the trigger. And everything spiraled out of control. It was at this time that Drew Cantrell, somebody who was supposed to teach safety courses, started acting like a rookie. Miss Cantrell wasn't holding the gun properly, so when the recoil happened, the gun redirects to the right. Miss Cantrell bumps Miss Carbo, who was standing in her designated spot. The gun points at Miss Carbo. She pulls the trigger a second time, and Miss Carbo shot in the leg. Now, the defense argues that Miss Cantrell did everything right. That she didn't break any rules and that she definitely didn't have any repeated rule violations. So members of the jury, let's look at it. Be aware of your surroundings. Drew Cantrell testified today that she wasn't aware of Justice Carbo's movement when she fired the first shot. If it's loaded, leave it on the line. You heard Ms. Carbo testify today that Drew Cantrell brought the gun from the store into the range, and at no point did Justice Carbo see her load the gun. Members of the jury, the gun was loaded the whole time. Ms. Cantrell broke this rule. Again. After a verbal reprimanding for Ms. Coleman, it wasn't enough, and she broke this rule again on May 28th, 2022. Now, the defense's affirmative defense is an intervening cause, that the recoil from the gun was more than expected and more than should have been expected. There's no basis for this. Ms. Staub herself testified that a heavy recoil can be handled by a firm grip of the gun. But you heard multiple witnesses testify that Ms. Cantrell flinched prior to the first shot. She wasn't holding the gun. It was well known that multiple different models, multiple different guns, even if they're the same make and model, can handle different. They can have different recoils. Ms. Cantrell, as a safety instructor, should have known this. She should have been prepared to handle the recoil. Now, even Ms. Staub herself, who testified that the recoil was a factory defect, when asked what that defect was, she couldn't tell you. Members of the jury, the defense's own expert, the only witness who could be qualified to tell you if there was a defect, doesn't know what that defect is. That's because there was no defect. Ms. Cantrell was entirely responsible for the safety of the course. It was her actions on May 28th, 2022 that led to Justice Carbo's injury. Now, shooting star's entrustment of a firearm to Drew Cantrell puts him in violation of Huron Civil Code Section 2007. Huron Civil Code Section 2007 establishes a set of standards that one must meet in order to be fit to be sold or entrusted with a firearm. Places the burden on the giver to evaluate the receiver's fitness using the totality of the circumstances test. And Shooting Star did not take this burden seriously. Shooting Star was aware of 2 prior incidents in which Drew Cantrell showed a lack of skill and discipline with a firearm. Yet they still entrusted her with a gun. Shooting Star's choice to hire, supervise, and retain Drew Cantrell as a safety instructor, as well as entrust her with a firearm, resulted in Justice Carbo being shot in the leg. Shooting on May 28th, 2022 was avoidable because it was foreseeable. Shooting Star left somebody that they knew to be incompetent with firearms in charge of a training course with complete rookies. Drew Cantrell should have known how to properly handle a Glock 22, could have had a firmer grip on the gun to prevent losing control, but didn't. It's for these reasons that we ask you find Shooting Star LLC liable for both causes of action. They should have, and they could have, but they did not. Thank you.
Yes, Ron. I also asked the demonstrative.
Of course not.
Members of the jury, a malfunction led to a misfire. For the past 2 hours, you've heard a lot. You've heard about a training course that took place on May 28th, 2022 at Shooting Star Gun Club, and you've heard about the misfire that happened during that training. Today, the plaintiff held the burden of proof that they had to prove to you by preponderance of the evidence that first, the negligent hiring, retention, or supervision of Drew Cantrell, and under Huron Civil Code 2007, the reckless entrustment of the Glock 2 to Justice Carbo. And they have failed to meet this burden. First, the malfunction. Today you heard from our expert, Jackie Staub, an expert in firearm mechanics, about the malfunction of the gun. She reviewed the light trigger and the extreme recoil that Drew Cantrell herself And even the plaintiff's expert, Dr. Morgan Judd, who said that Drew Cantrell experienced extreme recoil with the Glock 22. Today, the defense has shown you that a malfunction led to a misfire. Another part of plaintiff's burden in today's case was Imperion Civil Code 2007, also known as the Act. In plaintiff's own words, they thought that Shooting Star didn't take their burden of this act seriously. But members of the jury, the only person who didn't take this burden seriously was the plaintiff themselves. As I'd like to recall any time during trial that they tried to mention this act and prove that Shooting Star recklessly sold this gun to Justice Carbo, but the only witnesses who told you about it were the defense's witnesses themselves, and Justice Carbo, who herself said that she checked 15 boxes, certifying her, ensuring that she was fit to own this firearm. Members of the jury, they failed to meet this burden. Now, plaintiff tried to tell you over and over again, shouldn't have, could have, did not. But I want to tell you another phrase. Did enact safety measures, could not have prevented a mechanical misfire, and did everything they could to prevent a situation like this. But nothing can prevent a mechanical misfire, members of the jury. It doesn't matter who was teaching the course on May 28th, it still would have misfired, as we've shown you through multiple witnesses in today's case. Now, you've also heard the plaintiff mention 2 incidents, one in May of 2021 and one in November in 2021. And they tried to tell you that these incidents were the negligent retention of Drew Cantrell. But neither of these incidents happened in the gun range. And neither of these incidents was anybody hurt. And neither of these incidents were ever repeated, as you heard not only Drew Cantrell, but Skylar Coleman say. Members of the jury, plaintiff also called Ross Hernandez to the stand and Dr. Morgan Judd, who told you that the incident in November of 2021, who told you about the incident in November of 21, that no one else was in the shop. But members of the jury, since no one was in the shop, no one was hurt. And after you heard that Skylar Coleman took immediate action reprimanding Drew Cantrell for this, not negligence. She reprimanded Drew Cantrell, and after she never saw this incident repeated, as Drew Cantrell told you, she learned from her mistakes. Now you've also heard the plaintiff expert Morgan Judd tell you that even a qualified firearms user can experience a gun malfunction. And members of the jury, that's what happened today. Gun safety trainer Drew Cantrell, an experienced user in firearms, experienced a malfunction, and no safety precautions put in place could have prevented this malfunction from happening, members of the jury. An employer isn't going to fire a qualified employee because they've made 2 mistakes. And as you've heard Skylar Coleman say, 2 minor mistakes over 20 years of handling firearms. Skylar Coleman took the proper action by writing Drew Cantrell up and saying in a memorandum that any further violations would result in termination. But members of the jury, there were no further violations because a misfire is not a violation. Now, before trial, both counsels had to argue over the Responsible Firearms Sales and Practices Act, saying that the plaintiff had to show you the reckless sale of the gun to Justice Carbo. But they failed to do this today, failing to meet their burden. Not only did they not show you that, but they failed to show the reckless hiring, retention, and supervision of Drew Cantrell. And because they failed to meet their burden, members of the jury,
please do the only thing possible by remembering a malfunction led to a misfire and find Shooting Star not liable. Thank you.
How much time is remaining for? Rob?
It's 4 minutes and 23 seconds.
You can proceed with your.
Your Honor, I'd ask that the timekeeper be able to move to the list.
Yes.
The malfunction caused the misfire. That's what the defense just told you. Well, that begs the question, what's the malfunction? Was it the Glock's 22's trigger? The Staub told you that it wasn't. Was it an identifiable component of the Glock 22 that caused some sort of recoil? Staub told you that it wasn't. But the defense told you that there was an unexpected recoil, that this was an unmanageable issue. Members of the jury, there's an issue with that argument. Because there wasn't some factory defect, there wasn't some uncontrollable aspect of the gun that Drew Cantrell should have seen coming. In reality, it's caused by Drew Cantrell mishandling the firearm. Ms. Staub testified that Drew Cantrell could have held the gun properly, could have held a firm grip on the gun to prevent any of this from happening. Now, members of the jury, Shooting Star should have seen this behavior from Drew Cantrell coming. That's exactly why they shouldn't have entrusted Drew Cantrell with a firearm. And let me clarify for you. The defense was talking about reckless sale. That's what the plaintiff was arguing, but that isn't the plaintiff's argument. Under Huron Civil Code Section 2007, the plaintiff is arguing the reckless entrustment of a firearm to Drew Cantrell. And today, we showed you with the preponderance of the evidence that it's exactly what occurred. We showed you with the preponderance of the evidence that Shooting Star negligently hired, retained, and supervised Drew Cantrell. Shooting Star should have seen this coming. Shooting Star could have taken action to prevent it, and they did not. It's for these reasons that we once again ask that you find the defendant liable for both causes of action. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. All right, everybody, that concludes our case for this evening. Just gonna ask you to stay put because I want to make sure we get you out of here as quickly as possible before closings. So just give us enough time to get these last pages of the ballot in and then we'll come. You guys can go ahead and clean up or whatever if you want to while we're doing that.
Yeah, good job. You guys are really good.
Say that again. Don't say that while ballots are out.
Yeah.
Don't say where you're from while ballots are out, please.
Yeah.
I think
Well, it's not. Alright, I think we're about ready for comment.
I have to write still.
Okay.
Running very slow, my apologies.
Your time. Like one more minute and then I'll.
Okay.
Everybody's in? All right, first of all, very nice job by all of you. My name is Stacy Allred. Yeah, judged some of you before somewhere. Have you been online? Were you in our last round? Yeah, I thought so. Either online or last year, some of you look very familiar. Anyway, I competed in high school mock trial for 4 years and in college mock trial for 4 years, and I'm a two-time college All-American. I coach high school mock trial. All that to say, I've seen a lot of mock trial, been a lot of rounds, I've been to a lot of tournaments. So I know this tournament may or may not be over for you after this round, but I'm going to limit just to a very few things that I think will help you here or in your state tournaments. First off, pronouns, get the witnesses' pronouns right. I think I say this every round because everybody struggles with it. Set up your own demonstratives. It was kind of strange that you were just standing there and letting your other partners do your work. That just felt unnatural to me. I would set up your own demonstratives. You know when you're going to use it. You know when you want it. Just put your easel out and then get it up when you're ready for it. I didn't see a single exhibit from anybody the entire trial. So I had no idea what y'all were doing with any exhibits because I didn't know what they were. So you need to show them to the judge, you need to publish to the judge, you need to publish to the jury. I don't think they got any either. So we don't know what you're doing because we couldn't see them. Again, these are little things, so don't take any of this with any overly emotional sense. I know it's late, I know it's dark. One thing that this is personal preference. Don't say the witness's name and then say introduce yourself to the jury and they say their name again. Just say, good morning, please introduce yourself to the jury, or please state your name for the record. It's just redundant. If you're going to say, is that a yes to my question? Make sure it was a yes answer that was supposed to be elicited. Sometimes the answer should have been no, and you were saying, is that a yes to my question? And it didn't make sense. I thought there was a very heated exchange here that got overly heated. I think it was an independent. I don't know what was going on there. I think we needed to protect the witness a little more from this side, and I think we got a little overly hostile over here. Trust me, I know I used to be the very same way. It is a very thin line between being confident and cocky or arrogant. So I think that's a line that everybody kind of needs to watch. When we get loud, you have to be very careful when you want to get loud. But both sides could do a little better with like just your total overall presentation. Clean up your tables, be paying a little more attention, don't be writing when you don't need to be. And unless you have something urgent to tell your co-counsel, especially like during speeches, because if you're doing something at the table, then I'm paying attention to you, I'm not paying attention to who's talking. Overall, I thought you all did a really nice job. Some of my objections may have been, take those with a grain of salt. It's like, this is our 4th round judging. I know you all are tired. That is one thing I want to say. And I know Nick will say the same thing from experience. So we know what it's like in the 4th round at the end of a tournament. You're exhausted. Okay, I know you're tired. I know you're mentally drained, but I could tell it felt a little flat across the board, just a little lacking in energy. I know it's a lot. I know it's exhausting, but sometimes in these 4th rounds, it's we're going on or we're going home. So you got to keep that energy up throughout the whole thing. But other than that, it's been a privilege to be here this weekend. I love coming back every year and doing this. You guys are doing great things with your time. So I'm very impressed. I'll turn it over to our jurors.
Well, thank you, everybody. I'm Nick Corey. I used to actually compete against Stacy in college. I was at the University of Cincinnati. She was at Bellarmine in Louisville, Kentucky. And so we got to see each other. And now we're BFFs and we travel around the country and judge these things. I'm not going to add any specific comments. They're all in my ballot, so feel free to come up afterwards if you have any questions. But I just want to thank everybody for letting us be here. And, it's always a privilege to see young people doing great things. And as someone who benefited greatly from mock trial, and now I'm a healthcare executive in Seattle, Washington. So I didn't go the law route, I went the administrative route, but I use these lessons every day. It's so true. Listen to it and pay attention to what you're learning here, because it applies no matter what you do with your time in your life in the future. And value the friendships that you make, whether they're your opponents or your teammates, because those are valuable as well. And the last thing I'd say is I encourage you, and this is probably a few years off for many of you because you all look really young, but as you get into college and you get out of college and you have the opportunity to come back and judge and to be a part of mock trial in the future, please do it, because it's so cool to get to be able to give back and to continue to be involved in a community that means so much. So congratulations, best of luck to all of you. I hope you all go on and win your state tournaments back in your home states.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. In the middle of my big speech. See, this is why we always went head to head, but no. Anyway, congratulations and thank you so much. Go ahead.
Where are you from? We're from Las Vegas. Vegas?
Oh, we're from California, around that way.
We're not in the same area. Well, close to each other.
Yeah, my name's Elijah. Somewhat similar background, competed in high school for 4 years. I've now been a high school coach for 7. Maybe not quite as much experience, but been at this a while too. So I just a couple of things, trying to keep things as tight as possible, recognizing I'm the last thing between you and dinner. So both these teams are competing at a really high level. So I think these are kind of like maybe a little nitpicky, but these are just little things you can do to really elevate your performance to the next level. First, when you're giving a cross, don't always have your first instinct be to make an objection to that cross. Often, if you come back and ask a couple of follow-up questions, you're going to make the same point you made giving the objection battle, but you can actually have it be officially on the record, and you can get the witness to agree with you rather than just getting the judge to agree with you. So that kind of drives those points home a little bit. I'm a mock trial geek. I love a good objection battle, but just think about, just put yourself in the shoes of your audience and how you're going to score some points and elevate your performance. Secondly, this came up a couple of times, questions about whether a witness was 100% certain of something. Given that this is a civil case, that isn't as effective as a point as it might be, because we don't have to be absolutely certain of anything, right? There's a preponderance of the evidence standard. So if a witness says like, well, I'm not 100% sure, it's not really that effective of a point, because if the witness is just even, 70% certain of it, like that's still a pretty compelling point, and that really helps you in a preponderance case. So think about the burden of proof even as you're doing your examinations, and bringing those legal elements to bear throughout the trial and not just emphasizing them in opening and closing is another effective route. Last thing I'll say, and as Nick said, I'm happy to stick around for a few minutes to answer any more specific questions. Another thing, this maybe is just a pet peeve of mine, but like simply asking, just get rid of it. It doesn't do anything to help your objection response. There's no stipulation in the rules of evidence of like, oh, if you simply ask the witness about this thing that may be a speculation or not. Just focus on the law, focus on citing the rule number and what exactly your argument is. Just be really specific, more likely to get the judge to agree with you. Always put yourself in the shoes of whoever you are trying to persuade at that moment, whether it's the jury and you need to share exhibits with us, or whether it's the judge, and bringing things back to the law and back to the rules of evidence and being very specific about what you're claiming and why you're right. And that'll just take your performance to the next level. But again, thought it was a very strong round. Both teams are doing really well, and best of luck the rest of your seasons.
Thank you, guys. Best of luck.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys very much. Thanks for judging all the rounds.
Of course, that was good.
Yeah.
I am a freshman attorney and this is my first
I could kind of tell you were maybe on the other side of the thing. That is fine. I mean, you have a ton of promise, but you're on top of things by and large. I was an opener 3 years. So I sympathize with you a lot, leading up and just sort of having like the antsiness of trying to give an opening. So the more you can like kind of use the well, think about moving meeting in that space. I think this because it kind of it takes some of that nervous and puts it into something that isn't just being nervous, right? So do that and really kind of brings the jury into your eyes. Other than that, just practice college. You're doing really well, especially assuming you started mock trial like 2 months ago. Probably. Okay.
So
You're doing so well for working hard. You have a ton of, like I said, just practice makes perfect. So you're doing well. So get the confidence, that'll come.
Something that I can do, because I have riddling anxiety. It's fine. Move, use the well and move somewhere else. That gives you minutes, like look at the floor, collect your breath, but it's not obvious to anybody else that you're nervous. You know, it just looks like I'm moving because I'm gonna make a point and I'm shifting. I think that's really good. But you're thinking.
And now both of us said it, we're not in sync.
No, I mean, movement is a really good way to either like catch a train of thought too. And nobody knows but you that you missed a question or you didn't ask what you wanted to. Nobody knows that but you. So if you don't let it show on your face, then nobody else is gonna know. So yeah, maybe you're witness.
yeah, one judge said my body was basically
It'll come with
not
time.
suspecting the judge. It's a reference to a judge of time.
It'll come with time.
One thing I can tell you is you're like me, like when I
Thank you
was
so much for your
I'm pushing through with and I can even see this like you breathe in and out,
Thank you for
like you hear that sound. That's okay. That's all right. I did the same thing. You're trying to process and you go. So don't let that also throw you off. You're really feeling like I'm not just trying to figure out where I am. So if I roll with it, because I think that staying natural and being a human being to me scores better than some of the presentations that you've seen where they have the mock trial quiz.
Swaying.
I'd rather see them go. Here we go. We're human beings. So,
this is such a valuable experience as a freshman.
Yeah.
oh my team. Oh
Some of like that really high level college people are like, try. Stop. Yeah.
now the high school kids are like use each other. They're like do the hand, the mock trial push.
Never did the hand. I have a lot of things in my face.
The thing I never get is like the hands by your sides works well and it works well for some people, but the people who do like the dramatic point and then like slow it.
Oh yeah.
It's not natural.
And it's like nobody
this way.
It's stage hands, right? So you're not music,
exactly.
like a dance.
Right. And it's like it maybe would work if like you had a bigger space, but like this is like
this is very tight.
Wide. Yeah. Like, just be a human.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're in Seattle, where are you?
North Carolina.
North Carolina.
East to west coast.
Opposite sides. Whose good is that? Plaintiff, is this y'all's?
No, it was on the table when we.
Use the box.
Oh.
Yeah, I agree with your left arm.
Oh, everybody. I was wondering why they all looked the same. They're proud of it. Come on, I need.
Pleasure, you in Chicago?
I'm in South End.
Oh, cool, all right. Out by Notre Dame. I grew up and then went to undergrad in Cincinnati.
Nasty.
Westerner, the Navy. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Our
guys.
pleasure.
So much for being here.
Sorry to run, but I'm gonna be in. Closing ceremony for the bed, whether we did or not. This is Lucia's backpack.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Of course, you guys have a
Thank
great
you.
day, of course.
Thank you. Oh my God. You're welcome. Wow, you're not taking a computer charger, guys?
I was about to say.
Take it. When you come to closet here, put everything on. Like that. No. No. Start walking, guys. Start walking, please.